We've all been there, that whole love thy neighbor thing. Sounds great on paper, right? Except when your neighbor decides 3 a.m. is the perfect time for death metal karaoke, or parks their rusty 1972 Gremlin on your prize-winning petunias. The truth is, neighbors can be a real crapshoot. Some are awesome. They bring you casseroles when you're sick and help you hide the body when the karaoke singer comes knocking. Others? Let's just say they make you consider investing in a moat. And maybe a few crocodiles. This, my friends, is for all of us who've ever stared out our windows and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me. Fasten your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy ride." Let's talk about Barry. Barry loves two things, grilling and not buying groceries. Every Saturday, like clockwork, Barry fires up the old charcoal chimney and cooks enough meat to feed a small army. The problem? Barry only invited 2 people, himself and whatever unfortunate soul wandered into his backyard first. Now, I'm not saying Barry's a bad guy. He's got the social graces of a rabid badger, sure, but he means well. It's just that his idea of a friendly invitation is yelling, "Hey, you want a burger? Too late, I already made you one," over the roar of his propane tank. The moral of the story? If you see Barry in his backyard with a spatula and a gleam in his eye, run. Run like the wind. Dogs, man's best friend, loyal companions. They come in all shapes and sizes, from the tiniest teacup poodles to the largest Great Danes. Each one has its own unique personality, quirks and habits that endear them to us. Walking poop factories that eat your slippers and bark at squirrels. We love them, right? They bring joy, laughter, and sometimes a bit of chaos into our lives. But no matter how much trouble they cause, we can't help but adore them. But sometimes their owners, well, that's another story. The way people handle their pets can be as varied as the dogs themselves. Some owners are patient and understanding, while others can be a bit over the top. Take Mrs. Peabody and her Chihuahua, Princess Sparklepuff. Mrs. Peabody dotes on her little dog, dressing her up in the finest canine couture and treating her like royalty. Princess Sparklepuff wouldn't hurt a fly. She's a timid little thing, always looking around nervously and jumping at the slightest sound, mostly because she's terrified of her own shadow. It's almost comical how such a small dog can be so scared of everything around her. Mrs. Peabody, on the other hand, is convinced her precious pooch is a fearsome beast who strikes terror into the hearts of men. She believes that Princess Sparklepuff is a fierce protector, ready to defend her at any moment. So every time Princess Sparklepuff so much as glances at another dog, Mrs. Peabody launches into a tirade about vicious animals and irresponsible owners. She'll go on and on about how other dogs are a menace and how their owners should be more careful. The irony, it seems, is lost on her. While she rants about the dangers of other dogs, her own little princess is cowering behind her, too scared to even bark. Meanwhile, next door we have Mr. Johnson and his St. Bernard behemoth. Mr. Johnson is the complete opposite of Mrs. Peabody. He's laid back and easygoing, taking everything in stride. Behemoth is the canine equivalent of a furry bulldozer. He's big, clumsy, and full of energy. He barrels through the garden, knocking over anything in his path. He drools like a leaky faucet and sheds enough to knit a whole new dog. His fur gets everywhere, and his drool can be found on just about every surface in the house. But is Mr. Johnson bothered? Not a bit. He just takes it all in stride, always with a smile on his face. To him, Behemoth's antics are just part of the package. He just smiles and says, he's just being friendly. Mr. Johnson believes that Behemoth's size and energy are just signs of his friendly nature. As Behemoth barrels through the neighborhood, flattening fences and terrorizing squirrels, his size and enthusiasm can be a bit much for the neighbors, but Mr. Johnson just laughs it off. The lesson here? Sometimes you just can't win. Whether you have a tiny, timid Chihuahua or a massive, energetic St. Bernard, there's always going to be something to deal with. Stock up on earplugs and invest in some sturdy footwear. You're gonna need it. Because in the end, it's all part of the adventure of having a dog. Section 4. The Case of the Chronically Misplaced Car. Remember that game we used to play as kids, Where's Waldo? You'd spend hours scanning the pages, trying to find that elusive character in the red and white striped shirt, hidden among a sea of distractions. It was fun, challenging, and sometimes a bit frustrating, but it was all in good spirit, a test of our observation skills and patience. Yeah, well, some neighbors have turned parking into a real-life version of that, only this time, it's not a game, and it's definitely not fun. Imagine coming home after a long day, only to find that your usual parking spot has been taken over by a car parked so haphazardly, It looks like it was dropped from the sky, except instead of a guy in a striped shirt, it's their car. And it's not just any car, it's the same car, over and over again. It's like a recurring nightmare that you can't wake up from. You start to wonder if there's some hidden camera, capturing your reactions for a prank show. And it's never where it's supposed to be. One day it's in your spot, the next day it's blocking the entrance, and sometimes it's just sitting there, right in the middle of the driveway as if daring you to do something about it. Take, for example, the case of Mr. Henderson, a man who, by all accounts, is a decent, friendly neighbor. He's the kind of guy who'll help you carry your groceries, lend you his lawnmower, and even water your plants when you're on vacation. Now, Mr. Henderson is a perfectly nice guy. He's always got a smile on his face and a kind word for everyone. You'd never suspect that he could be the source of so much parking-related frustration. Except when it comes to parking. For some reason, the concept of parking within the lines seems to elude him. It's as if the lines are invisible to him, or perhaps he sees them as mere suggestions rather than rules to be followed. You see, Mr. Henderson seems to believe that parking spaces are merely suggestions. He'll park his car wherever he pleases with no regard for the chaos he leaves in his wake. It's as if he's playing a game of Tetris, but with real cars and no clear objective. He'll park his car diagonally across two spaces. It's almost impressive how he manages to take up so much space with just one vehicle. You'd think he was trying to make a statement, but what that statement is, no one can quite figure out. He'll park it on the sidewalk. Yes, you heard that right. The sidewalk. As if the designated parking areas weren't enough, he feels the need to encroach on pedestrian territory as well. It's a wonder he hasn't received more tickets. He'll park it in your living room if you leave the door open long enough. The worst part? He seems completely oblivious to the inconvenience he's causing. It's as if he's living in his own little world where parking rules don't apply. When you confront him about it, he just blinks those big, innocent eyes and says, "Oh, was that your spot?" As if he genuinely had no idea. It's almost endearing in a frustrating sort of way. I didn't see any lines. The solution? Well, it's not as simple as you'd hope. You could try talking to him, but that hasn't worked so far. You could leave notes, but those seem to disappear into the void. Invest in some traffic cones. Or maybe a forklift. Yes, a forklift might be just the thing you need to move his car out of the way when he decides to park it in the most inconvenient spot imaginable. You know, for those times when Mr. Henderson decides to park on your roof. Because with Mr. Henderson, you never know where his car will end up next. It's a constant adventure, one that keeps you on your toes and makes you appreciate the simple joy of a properly parked car. Section 5. Silence is golden, especially after midnight. They say music soothes the savage beast, and indeed music has a magical way of touching our souls, lifting our spirits and even helping us through tough times. But what happens when that soothing melody becomes a relentless noise that invades the sanctity of your peaceful night? Imagine this. It's 3 a.m., and your neighbor decides that Bohemian Rhapsody is best enjoyed at a volume that could shatter glass. The walls vibrate, the floor shakes, and your dreams of a peaceful night are shattered. Yeah, not so soothing. The frustration builds as you realize that your much-needed rest is being stolen by someone else's idea of a good time. Now, I'm all for a good time. We all need to unwind, to let loose, to enjoy the music that makes us feel alive. But there's a time and a place for everything. A party at 8 p.m.? Perfect. A jam session in the middle of the day? Go for it. But when the clock strikes midnight and the world around you is trying to sleep, it's time to turn down the volume. And that time is not 2 a.m. on a Tuesday when the rest of the world is trying to sleep. We've all been there. The lights go out, the city quiets down, and you expect to drift into a peaceful slumber. You're drifting off to sleep, dreaming of sugar plums and lottery winnings, when suddenly, bam! A jarring noise pulls you out of your dreams and thrusts you into a world of frustration. It hits you like a sonic boom. The once peaceful night is now filled with the relentless thump-thump-thump of a subwoofer, the telltale thump-thump-thump of a subwoofer that's working harder than a one-armed paper hanger in a windstorm. It's relentless, it's maddening, and it feels like there's no escape. You try to ignore it. You really do. You fluff your pillow. You count sheep. You try every trick in the book to drown out the noise. You consider investing in a hazmat suit so you can soundproof your entire bedroom, but it's no use. The noise seeps through every crack, every crevice, invading your space. The music just keeps on thumping. It's like a relentless beast that refuses to be tamed. The only solution? Earplugs. Lots and lots of earplugs. You stock up, you insert them, and you hope for the best. But even earplugs have their limits. Sometimes the noise is just too powerful, too invasive. And that's when you start to consider other options. or maybe a strongly worded note written in a language they don't understand. You pour your frustration into every word, hoping that somehow they'll get the message. Just be prepared for the consequences if they ever figure it out. Because in the end, silence is golden, especially after midnight. And sometimes, you have to fight for that golden silence.